Hey man, for centuries men were told that love was their highest calling, that to find a woman, to devote themselves, to sacrifice and protect, was the measure of their worth, and men believed it. They worked themselves to the bone to provide, they fought wars to defend, they built empires only to hand them over to the women they loved. Love was the fuel that made men endure the hardest struggles, but in this generation something has shifted. Men are no longer seeing love as the reward they once thought it was, they're seeing it as a gamble stacked against them, a risk where the house always wins and the player always loses. That's why men are walking away, not with anger, not with noise, but with silence, a silent exit from a game that has lost its meaning. The truth is, modern men have watched too many of their brothers fall. They've seen marriages end with the man losing his children, his money, his home, and his dignity. They've seen girlfriends leave after years of devotion, walking straight into the arms of someone new without looking back. They've seen men give everything only to be mocked, betrayed, or discarded the moment their effort no longer excites her emotions. And men are learning. They're not blind. They see that love, as it exists today, offers no guarantees. They see that a woman's loyalty is fluid, tied not to principle, but to feelings. And a man who has built his life on discipline, sacrifice, and vision does not want to tether it all to the fragility of fleeting emotions. So instead of fighting, men are quietly withdrawing. This silent exit is not about bitterness, it's about survival. Men have realized that the cost of love has become too high in a world where women are told they can always do better. They've realized that no matter how much they give, it's never enough. They've realized that their sacrifices aren't appreciated, their loyalty isn't valued, and their devotion is treated as weakness. And so they've chosen to walk away. Not because they hate women, but because they've chosen peace over chaos. They've chosen freedom over entrapment. They've chosen to invest in themselves instead of pouring into a well that never fills. This isn't a loud protest, it's a quiet revolution. A silent exodus of men who refuse to keep playing the role of the disposable provider in a game where their love is never enough. And here's the irony. Women are noticing the silence more than they ever noticed the devotion. They're beginning to complain about the lack of real men, about how nobody wants to commit, about how men are emotionally unavailable. But what they don't realize is that men aren't emotionally unavailable, they're emotionally unwilling. They're unwilling to gamble their futures on women who don't respect them. They're unwilling to sacrifice for a system that punishes them when it collapses. They're unwilling to attach themselves to partners who see them as replaceable the moment someone better appears. This unwillingness is not weakness, it's wisdom, and it's spreading, because men are watching each other, learning from each other, and refusing to repeat the mistakes of the past. The silent exit is not about men giving up on love altogether. It's about men redefining love on their terms. They're realizing that love without respect is slavery. Love without loyalty is emptiness. Love without peace is poison. And if the only version of love available to them is one where they're constantly tested, constantly drained, and constantly discarded, then they'd rather build a life alone, not lonely, but alone. Alone with their mission, their purpose, their discipline, and their peace. Because a man who has mastered himself will never beg for the validation of a woman who hasn't mastered her own emotions. And once men embrace that truth, they stop chasing, they stop pleading, they stop fighting, and they walk away in silence, never to return to the battlefield of modern love. The modern man has also realized that the love he's being offered is conditional at best. A woman may say she loves him, but what she really means is, I love how you make me feel right now. The moment those feelings shift, the love vanishes. Men are seeing that their value in relationships is often tied to what they can provide, how much they can stimulate her emotions, or how well they fit into her fantasy. And brother, once a man sees that his worth is conditional in her world, he can never unsee it. He recognizes that true unconditional love is almost extinct. And when love itself becomes a transaction, when it's based on performance rather than principle, men check out. Because no man with self-respect wants to live as a contract worker in something that should be sacred. One of the biggest reasons men are walking away is because they've finally seen through the illusion. For decades, men were told that love was about sacrifice, that if they worked hard enough, provided enough, stayed loyal enough, they would be rewarded with respect and devotion. But what they got instead was indifference. They watched women chase excitement, chaos, and temporary thrills while ignoring the steady love of the men who stood by them. They learned that women don't stay loyal to consistency, they stay loyal to the emotions of the moment. And when a man internalizes that truth, He stops seeing love as a goal and starts seeing it as a trap, not a prize at the end of his efforts, but a cage waiting to close the moment he commits. This silent exit isn't fueled by hatred, it's fueled by exhaustion. Men are exhausted from trying to prove themselves to women who can never be satisfied. They're exhausted from being told they're not enough, no matter how much they give. They're exhausted from constantly walking on eggshells, trying not to trigger discontent in someone who shifts moods like the wind. And exhaustion, brother, kills desire. A man who is tired of fighting loses his hunger to try. And so instead of yelling, instead of arguing, instead of pleading, men are choosing the quiet path. They're simply stepping away, not to punish her, not to make a statement, but to reclaim their peace. Because peace is worth more than validation, and silence is louder than any "I love you" that fades with time. And here's the hardest pill for women to swallow. Men are happier once they walk away. At first they fear loneliness, but soon they discover freedom. They realize how much energy they wasted chasing loyalty in a world where loyalty was never guaranteed. They realize how much time they lost trying to maintain emotions that weren't theirs to control. And as they redirect that energy into themselves, into their fitness, their money, their purpose, they begin to thrive. They discover a peace they never knew existed, a focus they never had, a strength they didn't know they carried. And once a man tastes that kind of freedom, brother, he doesn't run back to the chaos. He stays gone. That's why the exit is silent, because there's no need to announce peace. Peace speaks for itself. Brother, understand this. Men are not abandoning love because they're incapable of it. Men love deeply, more deeply than they'll ever be given credit for. Men stay loyal longer, they endure more, they forgive more, but they're walking away because they finally realized that in the modern world, their love is not valued. It's mocked, it's exploited, it's taken for granted, and no man can thrive in a place where his deepest strength, his ability to love fiercely, is treated like weakness. So men are not leaving because they can't love. They're leaving because their love deserves better than the shallow validation of women who only honor feelings, not principles. And when a man truly sees that, he stops begging for love and starts building a life without it. That's the silent exit. One of the unspoken reasons men are leaving love behind is because they see the imbalance of accountability. A man is expected to give endlessly, to provide, to protect, to sacrifice. But when a relationship collapses, the blame falls almost entirely on him. Society never asks what the woman did to keep her man. Society never holds her accountable for betraying, neglecting, or walking away. Instead, it paints her as the victim and the man as the failure. And men have grown tired of being villains in stories where they bled to keep things alive. They've realized that no matter how much they give, their failures are magnified and their sacrifices are ignored. And so they've chosen to walk away, not to escape responsibility, but to escape a system that never gives them fair ground. You can see this in divorce courts across the world. A man can work decades to build wealth, only to lose half of it overnight. He can fight to be a father, only to be reduced to a visitor in his children's lives. He can stay loyal for years, only to be betrayed and then punished financially for the privilege of being betrayed. Men are watching this happen and asking themselves, why would I ever step into that trap? And they're right. It's not bitterness, it's mathematics. The risk is too high, the reward too uncertain, and when the equation doesn't balance, men step back. That's not cowardice, that's intelligence. That's men refusing to play a game where the outcome is already stacked against them. Another reason men are walking away from love is because they've seen behind the curtain of modern female desire. They've realized that women no longer choose men for character, loyalty, or principle, but for stimulation. They chase the man who excites them, not the man who supports them. They admire the man who makes them feel butterflies, not the man who builds their foundation. And men have realized they can't compete with that, nor should they want to, because butterflies fade, stimulation dies, and emotional highs always crash. A man who builds his life on permanence doesn't want to stake his future on a woman who lives only for temporary feelings, and so he leaves quietly, choosing stability over chaos, even if that stability means being alone. Love in its modern form has become a consumer product. Social media has turned relationships into performances, where affection is flaunted for likes but rarely lived in private. Dating apps have made people disposable, where one swipe erases years of effort, and culture has convinced women that there's always a better man waiting just around the corner. Men are not blind to this. They see the endless scrolling, the curated fantasies, the constant temptation. They know that even if they give their all, she's one distraction away from leaving. And when you know you're always one swipe away from being replaced, how do you give your heart fully? You don't. You hold back. You protect yourself. You walk away, not with anger, but with the wisdom that peace is worth more than performance. The silent exit is also fueled by the realization that love has been weaponized against men. Men are told they're incomplete without it, told they're failures if they don't marry, told they're broken if they don't devote themselves to a woman. But when they do, they're ridiculed for being too soft, too attached, too dependent. It's a trap. Damned if they do, damned if they don't. And men have finally seen through the manipulation. They've realized they don't need a woman to validate their manhood. They don't need marriage to prove their worth. They don't need love to define their existence. They can be whole without it. And that realization is dangerous because the moment a man stops believing love is necessary, he becomes free. Free to build, free to lead, free to live without begging for validation. Men are walking away because they finally understand that peace is priceless. For too long, men tolerated chaos in the name of love. They accepted mood swings, manipulation, endless tests, and emotional roller coasters because they were told that was part of being in a relationship. But brother, peace is the ultimate currency for a man who has endured enough storms. A man who has worked hard all day doesn't want to come home to more conflict. A man who has fought battles in the outside world doesn't want to fight another war in his own house. He wants silence, stability, and clarity. And when he realizes that love in the modern age rarely provides that, he chooses solitude over stress. Because solitude may feel lonely, but it never feels like betrayal. Another truth is this: men have realized they can find fulfillment outside of women. For generations, men were told that their value was tied to how well they could attract and keep a woman. That message was drilled into them: work hard, earn money, provide, and you'll be rewarded with a loving wife. But modern men have broken that conditioning. They've discovered they can build businesses, travel the world, forge brotherhoods, achieve greatness, and live meaningful lives without ever putting their heart in a woman's hands. And once a man discovers he can fill his life with purpose, love becomes optional, not essential. And when something becomes optional, the desperation dies. That's why men are walking away. Not because they can't love, but because they no longer need it. You must see how dangerous this realization is for modern women. For decades, women believed men would always chase, always provide, always sacrifice. They believed they were the prize men needed to complete their lives. But when men start walking away, when men start building without them, when men stop begging for attention, women lose their leverage because their entire power has always rested on the assumption that men would never leave, that men would always pursue, no matter the cost. But now the cost has become too high, and men have decided to keep their energy for themselves. And in that silence, in that refusal to play, women are starting to panic. Not because men disappeared, but because men stopped performing. The silent exit is also a form of protection. Men have realized that in the modern world, love is often a liability. The wrong relationship can drain your money, your time, your energy, and your focus. The wrong woman can sabotage your goals, mock your dreams, and destroy your confidence. And when you weigh that risk against the reward, the math doesn't add up anymore. Why risk everything for someone whose loyalty depends on feelings that could change tomorrow? Why build an empire only to hand it over to someone who might abandon it when she's not happy anymore? That's why men are protecting themselves. Not by fighting, not by arguing, not by proving, but by leaving quietly, refusing to let love become the knife that cuts them down. The truth that men are waking up to is this: the silent exit is not weakness, it's strength. It takes strength to walk away from the game you were raised to believe was your destiny. It takes strength to admit that love as it exists today is not worth the sacrifice. It takes strength to choose peace over validation, freedom over illusion, solitude over slavery. Men who walk away are not broken, they're awakened. They've seen the truth that most men ignore until it's too late, that love when built on fragile emotions will always collapse, and instead of waiting to be destroyed by it, they leave before it claims them. That's not bitterness, it's clarity. And clarity, brother, is what makes their silence more powerful than any protest ever could. Men are realizing that the greatest act of rebellion in a world that constantly demands their energy is to withhold it, to walk away, not with anger, not with noise, but with silence. Silence that cannot be debated. Silence that cannot be shamed. Silence that cannot be twisted. Because when a man simply stops showing up, stops investing, stops sacrificing himself for love that isn't real, there's nothing left for anyone to attack. and that silence speaks louder than words ever could. It says, I choose me, I choose peace, I choose freedom. And brother, once a man truly makes that choice, he can never be controlled by illusions again. Women often mistake this exit as weakness, as bitterness, as men being unable to handle rejection, but in truth, it's the exact opposite. Weakness is staying in something that drains you. Weakness is clinging to illusions, even after they've hurt you. Weakness is believing that suffering is the price of love. Strength is walking away. Strength is looking at the chaos and saying, this will not consume me anymore. Strength is choosing solitude over slavery. And when men make that choice in silence, they don't just free themselves, they change the rules of the game entirely. Because when enough men stop playing, the game collapses. Men are not just walking away from women, they're walking toward themselves. They're rediscovering the power of self-respect, the clarity of self-mastery, and the discipline of self-investment. They're pouring the energy they once wasted on trying to be enough for women into becoming more than enough for themselves. They're building wealth, strength, wisdom, and legacies. They're learning that love may come and go, but self-respect is permanent. And when a man is rooted in self-respect, he cannot be broken. That's why the silent exit is not an end, it's a beginning. It's the doorway to a higher life, a stronger frame, a clearer mind, and once men step through it, they never go back. This is why modern culture fears the silent exit of men, because when men stop pouring themselves into chasing validation, the entire system starts to shake. Industries built on simping collapse, narratives built on shaming crumble. Women who once thrived on endless male attention begin to feel the void, and suddenly the power shifts. Men who once begged for scraps of love now hold the leverage, because they don't need anyone to complete them, they've already completed themselves. That's the true revolution, brother. Not men shouting in anger, but men disappearing into their own purpose, untouchable, unstoppable, unshaken. So understand this, brother. The silent exit is not the death of love. It's the death of illusion. Men are not giving up on connection. They're giving up on the false version of love that drained them, betrayed them, and laughed at their loyalty. They're walking away not from women entirely, but from being slaves to a system that devalues them. They're choosing themselves, their mission, their peace. And when a man chooses peace, he becomes unbreakable. Because love may betray, emotions may fade, women may leave, but a man rooted in his own truth never falls. That's why the silent exit is spreading. Why men are leaving without looking back. Not because they don't believe in love anymore, but because they finally believe in themselves.